Hey guys, welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be doing a tier list of all the Series 2 cards that are in Marvel Snap, and we're going to be going over them in the mindset that you are a Series 2, Series 1 early game player, so you don't necessarily have access to all the other cards that are in Pool 3, Pool 4, and Pool 5. So these cards are going to be ranked according to you have access to Pool 2 and Pool 1 cards only. And to just break down the tiers, we have the standard S, A, B, C, and F tier. S being the cream of the crop card that's going to be meta relevant and a high win rate, maybe even a high cube rate card. An A tier card is a little bit worse than that, doesn't necessarily win you as many games, doesn't create any new archetypes necessarily, but still very strong in the meta. B tier can be strong in the meta, can be strong as an individual card, but it doesn't have as good of consistencies that you may see in the A and the S tier level. C tier is getting pretty weak. They're more gonna be found in niche decks and are just not generally as strong. And F tier is obviously just not a very good card in general. There's probably way better options in many of the archetypes the card would fit in, and it's just not meta relevant or even a good card. And before we get into the video, over 80% of you guys who are watching this channel are not subscribed. So please remember, if you're liking and enjoying the content, to remember to like, comment, and subscribe on the video. It helps out tremendously with the channel and the algorithm. And with that, let us get into the ranking. And first up, we have Agent 13, and she is a pretty strong one drop at this point in the game as a Pool 2 card. She adds to your hand, which helps significantly with Devil Dinosaur control style decks, and as well as the Collector, which you will also unlock during Pool 2. So she's just generally a strong card. She's cheap. She adds potential value with giving you a random card that your opponent won't be expecting. It could be a very good 6-drop from Series 3 or Series 5, who knows. So I'm going to throw her into the A tier. She's very strong. She's not the strongest, but she's a very good card. And next up is Bucky Barnes, and he is the next addition that you're going to unlock for the Destroy archetype, and he is a pretty solid Destroy option. Turning into the Winter Soldier with a 6 power for only 2 energy is very good, but in this early stage of the game that everybody's going to be in when they're only having Pool 2 and Pool 1 really as their options, there aren't a great selection of Destroy cards. You're going to have Carnage and Deathlock to help destroy things, and that's not really enough for you to be consistent with Bucky Barnes. So he is good when he was working, so I'm going to throw him into the B tier, but he is not great until you unlock more solid options for Destroy into Pool 3. And moving on, we got Cloak, and Cloak is another move option that you get early in the game. He's pretty good stat line in terms of a 4 power for 2 energy, but unfortunately, like most move cards, even in the highest level of gameplay, Series 5, the move option just isn't great, and he can be a bit clunky and cause your opponent to make pretty good moves as well. So I'm going to just throw him down into the C tier. He's not a terrible card, so he doesn't deserve F tier, but he's not going to do anything to really help you win games significantly, in my opinion. And next up, we have Ebony Maw, and Ebony Maw is an unbelievable amount of power for 1 energy, which you can't sleep on. But at the point of Pool 2 and Pool 1, there's just not enough to counteract his negativity that you can't play any cards here afterwards. So I'm going to throw him right into the F tier. He has a lot of potential, but you really need to find ways to cancel out his ongoing ability. And right now you only have access to the Enchantress line of play, and got to get really lucky for that to work out properly for you. So there's just not enough consistency for you to be using Ebony Maw in a lot of decks. So I would not suggest using him until you are further into the game, and use some better 1-drops if you're trying to play a Zeus style deck. And Hobgoblin is the first card you're going to get introduced that has negative power, the 5, -8, and then he flips and goes to the other side of the board, which is a very cool effect. And he's pretty effective in the early game that you're going to be playing. New players don't really necessarily expect you to be playing a high energy card that all of a sudden comes to their side of the board and fills up their location and gives them a ton of negative power. So he's pretty strong in that regard. He does cost 5 energy and can be a little bit of a clunky play sometimes, especially if your opponent is playing a more controlling style deck. So I'm only going to throw him into the B tier, but he is a good card and you can throw him into a lot of decks if you are playing more of a control heavy, higher cost deck and you're starting to use Jubilee and other cards in that regard. He could be worth playing even more. And Iceman is just a fantastic card. He's a great card at any level in the game. He's a solid option any turn he's drawn. The 1 energy, 2 power is always a good stat line, and his effect of causing a card in your opponent's hand to go up a cost is significant at any stage in the game. It can throw off their game plan tremendously, and it can't be valued enough in my opinion. So I'm going to throw Iceman into the S tier. He is as strong as a pool 2 card, early game card that you are going to unlock, and you can almost include him in any type of deck you are creating at this point in the game. And we just talked about Jubilee a little bit in the Hobgoblin breakdown, and she is a pretty strong card in the fact that she can pull out the larger cost cards potentially in your deck and cheat them out earlier in the game. Unfortunately, you're kind of playing with a lottery in a way and gambling that she's going to pull something good out, and it's just not consistent enough for me to put her as like a high tier card, especially at the pool 2 level. There's just not enough stronger, higher cost cards that I would say justify her being in a lot of lists. She works very well with on reveal decks, and like if you're doing an Odin list, you can play with her and she'll probably be a little more effective in that list for you. But right now I'm just going to throw her into the C tier. And Killmonger is a staple in Marvel Snap because he is the first card that really helps you deal with the oppressive Zoo archetype that you really see a ton of in Pool 1. He is a large counter to it, kills all the 1-drops on the board. Your opponents are not going to be ready for him, most likely, when you're going to be at the Pool 1, Pool 2 level. And he's going to win you a lot of games. He's going to steal you a lot of cubes. There's not really any great ways to counter him at this point in the game as well. So, meaning a Pool 1 or a Pool 2 card. Armor obviously blocks it, but that's only going to prevent 1 lane of destruction. And if somebody's playing a Zoo deck with a bunch of 1-drops, obviously that power is going to be spread out everywhere, and you're going to get a lot of cards destroyed with your Killmonger being played. And he is a clear S tier card for Pool 2 and Pool 1 gameplay. And Leech is a interesting card. He is a great card for countering these oppressive control style decks that are holding on to cards for late game plays. He obviously doesn't really have a great stat line, being a 5 energy 3 power, but his effect is tremendous. So if somebody was holding on to play a big on reveal Odin on turn 6, you've now canceled out Odin's ability to double an on reveal effect. So that can be extremely powerful. He can make a Devil Dinosaur stink and only be a 3 power card. There's a lot of benefit to using Leech in these control archetypes. You can mess around with him in your own Devil Dinosaur lists, or maybe some variations of a Pro X list. Very solid card. He's not as great in this meta in terms of Pool 2 and Pool 1 gameplay, so I'm going to throw him into the B tier. And Morbius is an addition to the discard archetype that they kind of desperately need in Pool 2, and it helps. He helps, but he's going to go right into the C tier because there's just not enough good consistent discard at this point in the game for Morbius to like really stack up. You have your Blade, you have your Lady Sif, but it's not going to be a lot of consistent discard that's really going to allow your Morbius to get ramped up to anything significant. If you're playing that archetype in pool 2 and pool 1, you want to include him, but he's not going to do anything to help you really lock down and win games. And next up we have Nakia, and unfortunately Nakia is F tier. She's been F tier forever in this video game, and there's not much that's changed ever about her. She buffs up your hand, which is great in theory, but she's kind of clunky to play at 3 energy. The 3 power is just a mediocre stat line at 3 energy. She's not very consistent, and it never feels great playing her, so she's F tier. And following up Nakia is Okoye. She's the 2/2. She gives +1 power to everything in your deck. She's had a little bit of a resurgence now in gameplay in terms of high-level ladder play with Thanos blob decks, but that's not relevant to pool 2 and pool 1 players really. So she's not strong enough. She's weak. She's F tier. There's a lot better options you could be playing in your deck list. I mean, in theory, you could throw her into zoo decks and try to get a little bit of power buff, but you're gonna find more consistency with other cards in your lists than her. And I love Rhino. He's one of my favorite villains in the Marvel's universe, but the 3/3 stat line is not very good given his effect. It's pretty cool, his animations and everything, but he's going to fall into the C tier. There's just better options you're going to have at this point in the game to have more powerful cards. He's a good counter for Storm at this point in the game if you're running into her a lot, but other than that, there's not a lot of value for him as a 3-drop. You could be playing other cards that are going to fill his role better. And to add to the Destroy archetype, we have SabreTooth, the 3/4. When he gets destroyed, he's going to become 0 energy and he gets returned to your hand. And while that sounds good, he runs into a lot of the issues that you see with a lot of 3-drops in this game, and especially early in pool 2 and pool 1. It's kind of clunky to get him going and get the real value out of him. So I'm going to throw him into C tier. If you're playing destroy lists, there's not a lot of destroy cards that are good in pool 1 and pool 2. You have your Bucky Barnes, you have Wolverine, you have Carnage, and you're probably going to be throwing SabreTooth into your list just because you're hurting for good destroy cards that have additional value. So you're definitely going to play him in your destroy lists. He's just not that strong of a card, unfortunately. And Sandman is a really interesting card, not like anything else that you'll have seen in the game yet in pool 2 and pool 1. He makes it so you and your opponent are only allowed to play 1 card a turn. And if you have the ability to get him out even earlier than turn 5, you can really throw off your opponent, obviously, because you're going to have a deck with a strategy of playing bigger cards that have higher effects, like maybe a White Tiger into an Odin, so you're getting more value. And if you're playing an opponent who's playing a Zoo style deck, he is going to shut them down completely, and you're just going to win the game because they're not going to be able to compete with his ability. So Sandman is a B tier card at this point in pool 2 and pool 1, just because there's not a lot of great ways for him to ramp up into an earlier play. So he's going to probably be stuck getting played on turn 5 a lot at this stage of the game for you, but his value will only increase as your collection level increases. And Scorpion is just a valuable, solid card at any stage in the game, especially in Series 1 and Series 2. I would put him borderline S tier for just the amount of value he produces at the early stages of gameplay in Pool 1 and Pool 2, but I'm going to end up throwing him in the A tier for now. You're going to consistently find that he's going to drop power into your opponent's hand. It makes things a little clunky. I mean, if your opponent has a full hand, he's essentially a 2 9 in a way, right? Because he's adding -7 power to your opponent's hand with a full hand. So he has significant value for just only 2 energy. You can pretty much slot him in most types of decks and he's gonna find value. So he's a very versatile card in the early Pool 1 and Pool 2 gameplay that people are gonna be in. I don't really have any negative things to say about him. And moving on, we have one of the most meta-relevant cards you are going to unlock in the Pool 2, which is Shang-Chi, and he is clearly an S tier card as he has value throughout the game, no matter what rank, level, etc. you are. He's going to destroy anything with 10 or more power as long as armor isn't there, or Kyera if you're a Pool 3 plus player. So there's no other cards that do what he does in terms of destroying large cost cards with multiple being affected with his destruction. I can't say enough good things about Shang-Chi, even with his nerf that he had a few months ago to destroying things with only 10 power instead of 9. He saw a little bit of a dip of gameplay, but he's still extremely valuable, especially in the early games. Pool 2 and Pool 1, people don't expect you to be playing counters to like destroying Hulks or destroying anything that pops up like a monster island. Extremely good card. Great to throw into a lot of controlled decks if that's what you're doing. You could even slot him into some of your Zeus style decks to try to counteract a big power that you can't catch up to. And next up we have another S tier card, which is Storm, and she is interesting in Pool 2 and Pool 1 because there are no other cards like her in terms of a controlling effect of locking down a lane and make it unplayable. You can strategically start loading up a lane earlier if she's in your opening hand and you know you're going to play Storm on turn 3 and you have a turn 4 play. You're probably going to lock down that location and win it as a Pool 2 or Pool 1 player because there's not a lot of great counters to her. She has a ton of value even later in the game. She can get rid of a negative location for you and turn things around. I can't say enough good things about Storm. She's going to be valuable throughout your entire collection process. She's a borderline must include in most control lists that you're going to be playing in Pool 2 and Pool 1. So definitely get excited if you see her being unlocked and add her to your control decks. And next up is Sunspot, and if you enjoy the control archetype, he is the 1 cost for you. He ramps up significantly in his power, going up to even a 10 power 1 cost if you are really just milking it and skipping turns, which can be good if you are trying to become doing an Infinaut list or something along that lines. He does get countered significantly by Killmonger once you enter Pool 2, but there's not really anything you can do to counter him besides that. I would put him as a high S tier card, even after his nerf going down to 0 energy. He just gains power significantly each turn. You always have the option of just skipping your turn if you really want to just add power to him if you need him. Say he's in a Storm lane and your opponent got more power in it than you, you can still ramp up power in that lane and win it unexpectedly against your opponent. And Swarm is another card that is added to the discard archetype that can help you early in the game. You can target Swarm to be discarded and you can always stack up in your hand as a 0 cost 3 power. But with the same issue is going to come in that Morbius faces, so I'm going to throw Swarm into the C tier. There's just not enough consistent good discard that you're going to have in the Pool 2 and Pool 1 for Swarm to be really impactful. And like I said earlier, if you're playing discard lists and you like discard lists, Swarm is going to be in those lists. Very good to have tagged along with your Morbius that you've unlocked, but not enough consistency to put him any higher than a C tier in my opinion. And the Collector is a really fun card that people are going to have unlocked at this point. He is a card that works a lot with the other cards that you've unlocked at this point, like Devil Dinosaur, your Agent 13s, your Moon Girls. all the cards that add cards to your hand work extremely well with the collector, and if you draw him early in the game, he's an S tier card, but he's still a solid A tier card that is gonna ramp up significantly throughout the game, and your opponent is going to have to address the collector, especially if your hand is very good. And if they can't address him early, he's probably just going to win you that location, so you're going to be able to focus on a different lane when you're playing throughout the rest of the game. And the Infinaut is a very cool control card that you're going to see in this Pool 2 collection. The 6 power 20, or the 6 energy 20 power is a crazy stat line, and obviously he's harder to get out because you have to do nothing on turn 5 to play him on turn 6. But you can get lucky if you're playing control style Jubilee lists. You can potentially just pull him out randomly, and you're probably just going to win that lane. But you can do more lists with the Sunspot, like I was talking about earlier. You can skip turns. Your Sunspot's going to gain power. There's not a ton of consistency with him, so I can't throw him any higher than the B tier in Pool 2, Pool 1 gameplay. But you're going to win games and steal cubes with him potentially, just because a lot of opponents are not going to be expecting you to skip on turn 5 and then play 20 power on turn 6. And Vision is just a solid card overall. He's always been a solid card. You don't ever have to stick him just into move lists per se. He has a lot of value in a lot of control type decks. Or if you're doing a Jubilee list and you pull him out, you can then move him out of the lane so you have an extra play there. He's just an A tier card pretty much at any level of the gameplay. And yes, he only has 8 power for 5 energy, which is not a great stat line, but he is a great head game card, and that I mean your opponent is going to be thinking a ton about, is he going to move Vision? Is he going to keep Vision in the same spot? And if you can make your opponent overthink with cards, which Vision is a great card at doing that, you're going to win games and potentially steal more cubes. So he is a great card. And next up is Vulture, the 3/3, who gains 5 power when he moves, which is a great ability for the move lists. He's unfortunately going to fall into the C tier because of the same issues that Discard faces and Move has faced throughout Pool 2 and Pool 1. There's just not a great options and a ton of options that consistently help you move your cards, and Vulture falls victim to that because obviously to be an effective card and strong card, he needs to be moved. And finally, Warpath. He is a cool card in the fact that you can skip out on playing certain lanes, but he's going to fall into the C tier for me just because at this point in the game in Pool 2 and Pool 1 cards, you don't have a ton of cards that are helping you only play in 2 lanes to just win. So you're going to likely just be not getting the ongoing effect from Warpath, so he's just not going to be a card that's worth it. He's really good in destroyer lists, but you obviously, if you're only a Pool 2 and Pool 1 player at this point, you're not going to have the destroyer, and there's not going to be as much value for you to be playing Warpath. So guys, that is every Pool 2 Series 2 card ranked in Marvel Snap as they currently exist. Let me know if you think this is a accurate representation of where these cards should be tiered at, and let me know who your favorite Pool 2 card is. Personally, I'm a big fan of Shang-Chi in terms of countering decks and other cards in the meta, but I enjoy Storm a lot in terms of locking down lanes earlier than a Professor X option. I think she's slept on, and overall you can see I personally think the pool is generally weaker. There's a lot of C tiers, mid B tier cards that are gonna have some place in the meta and some place in your decks, but overall Pool 2 is not that strong of a pool collection. And if you made it all the way to the end of this rankings, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what you want to see ranked in the future. I should have a Pool 1, Series 1, and all beginner cards ranking coming out soon. It's just taking a little bit longer because there's over 70 cards I'd have to do in that one. So I will see you on the next one.